Hello everyone, and welcome back to our channel, your home for fearless South African political commentary and deep storytelling. Today we are tackling one of the most explosive court rulings of the year, a case that has left the presidency reeling, reopened the wounds of apartheid, and exposed how unfinished the nation's journey toward justice truly is. President Cyril Ramaphosa's government has just lost a R167M damages case linked to apartheid-era crimes. The Gauteng High Court in Pretoria dismissed the government's bid to delay the lawsuit, a lawsuit filed by 25 families of victims of political killings and disappearances during apartheid. These families say the democratic government betrayed them by ignoring the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's recommendations to investigate and prosecute those responsible for some of the darkest crimes in South African history. Let that sink in for a moment. We are not talking about ancient history. These are families who have waited since the 1980s and 1990s for closure, who sat through the TRC hearings, told their painful stories to the world, and believed that their sacrifice would mean something. But decades later, many are still waiting for justice that never came. The promise of reconciliation turned into silence, and silence turned into anger. When the government asked to postpone the case indefinitely, the court said absolutely not. Judge Nicolene Janse van Nieuwenhuizen called the request rather ironic, pointing out that the government itself had created the delay and now wanted to use that delay as an excuse for more waiting. In simple terms, the judge told them, "You caused the problem, you can't hide from it." Her ruling struck a nerve across the country. For years, activists have accused the ANC-led government of deliberately avoiding apartheid-era prosecutions to protect politically connected individuals who cross from the old regime into the new. Some of those figures allegedly played key roles in state structures after 1994, and reopening their cases would have embarrassed powerful people. The court's rejection of the government's delay application has now reignited those long-standing suspicions. The Foundation for Human Rights, which has been supporting these families, hailed the ruling as a breakthrough. They said it finally forces the government to confront its moral failure, the betrayal of the very people who believed in the democratic promise of justice. For these families, the victory is symbolic but monumental. It's a small step toward recognition after decades of denial. The Good Party also joined the applause, saying this is not just a legal win but a moral correction. They argue that South Africa's justice system has been weakened by political interference and bureaucratic excuses, and that this case could help restore public faith in the courts. The message is clear: you can't keep hiding from history and still claim to represent justice. Now, let's look at the bigger picture. President Ramaphosa, in May 2025, established a commission of inquiry to investigate why so many TRC cases were never pursued. On the surface, that seemed like progress. But the problem is, this commission doesn't have the power to decide compensation or enforce criminal accountability. It can write reports and make recommendations, but it can't deliver closure. So, while the president spoke about truth and healing, his government's lawyers were in court trying to block a case that seeks exactly that. And that's where the irony becomes painful. The TRC was one of the proudest achievements of South Africa's democracy. It showed the world that the nation could forgive without forgetting. But what happens when forgiveness is not matched with justice? What happens when the state that once fought oppression becomes the same structure accused of silencing truth? This case exposes how the democratic government inherited not just power but also the unfinished business of apartheid. By refusing to prosecute or compensate victims' families, successive administrations have allowed impunity to live on. It's as if the TRC's final chapter was never written. The government's defeat in this case reopens that chapter, and forces a new generation to confront the uncomfortable truth that democracy alone doesn't guarantee justice. For many South Africans, the R167M isn't the issue. It's the principle. It's about whether the state acknowledges that it failed the victims of apartheid by protecting political convenience over moral duty. Some might say, why dig up the past? But for the families of those who were tortured, killed, or disappeared, the past never ended. It lives in their memories, in unanswered questions, in graves that were never marked. The judgment also sends a message to younger generations that history is not something you can sweep away. Every time a government delays justice, it teaches a dangerous lesson that power can rewrite morality. And every delay means one more family goes to bed without closure. President Ramaphosa now faces a difficult choice. He can accept the ruling and finally begin to repair trust by compensating these families and reopening stalled cases. Or he can appeal, a move that would once again put the state on the opposite side of justice. Either way, this case will define his legacy as a leader. Is he the president who brought moral renewal, or the one who protected a system of silence? This case could also trigger a domino effect. Legal experts predict that more families may come forward with their own claims, demanding compensation for decades of neglect. That could open the floodgates for hundreds of lawsuits, forcing the state to finally reckon with the TRC's unfulfilled promises. And if that happens, South Africa will have to decide, do we pay the financial cost now, or the moral cost forever? The emotional weight of this case cannot be overstated. Imagine waiting 30 years to hear that your government cares. Imagine testifying before the TRC, reliving your trauma, and then watching nothing happen. For these families, this ruling is not just about money. It's about dignity. It's about being seen. It's about proving that their suffering mattered. This story also speaks to something larger, how nations remember. South Africa is known for its ability to forgive, but forgiveness without accountability becomes hypocrisy. The same state that celebrates Human Rights Day every March has now been told by its own courts that it failed the very principles it claims to uphold. In a way, this ruling brings the TRC full circle. It started as a process of truth-telling, now it ends with truth demanding justice. It reminds us that time does not erase responsibility, and that democracy cannot thrive on selective memory. As this case moves forward, South Africans will be watching closely. The world will too. Because this isn't just a story about R167 million, it's a story about promises, power, and the price of denial. So, what do you think? Should the government pay the R167 million and finally accept responsibility for the failures of the past? Or should it appeal, risking even more damage to its moral credibility? Let's hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this story insightful, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with others who care about South Africa's fight for truth and justice. Thank you for watching, and as always, stay informed, stay aware, and never stop questioning power. See you next time.